Well, thank you guys all for coming, and thanks for listening. Sunday Conversation, it used to be a pressure. Like I said, there was a certain amount of pressure from last week's talk. I actually called it, "The Pressure is Good." There's a certain amount of stress and pressure that we need to grow as human beings, but we shrink away from it. The more I do this, the more enlightened I'm becoming from my own having to dig down in my heart and not come with some practiced, ready-to-go speech, but really just plant a seed of thought. A seed gets planted in my mind and it grows. And so that is what brings me to this next thing that I found serendipitously. So I'm just going to read this to you. I'm not the best reader, but I'll give it a try. Here it goes. There was a farmer who grew excellent quality corn. Every year he won the award for the best grown corn. One year, a newspaper reporter interviewed him and learned something interesting about how he grew it. The reporter discovered that the farmer shared his seed corn with his neighbors. He said, "How can you afford to share your best seed corn with your neighbors when they are entering their corn in the competition with yours each year?" asked the reporter. "Why, sir," said the farmer, "don't you know? The wind picks up the pollen from the ripening corn and swirls it from field to field. If my neighbors grow inferior corn, cross-pollination will steadily degrade the quality of my corn. If I am to grow good corn, I must help my neighbors grow good corn as well." So is our lives. Those who want to live meaningfully and well must enrich the lives of others. For the value of a life is measured by the lives it touches. And those who choose to be happy must help others find happiness. For the welfare of each is bound up with the welfare of all. There was a picture of a really old farmer growing corn, obviously. What I realize is that as human beings, our mind is like the field. And it's a very fertile field. And I watch my wife, she goes out into her garden every day and every night, and she tends to her little crop that she has. And she's learning how to prune it, and she's watching videos on the internet of how to get more watermelons out of one plant. And I'm like, "What are you watching there?" And it's some guy going, "And if you take these little bushes here and you trim them underneath this." And this guy had 18 watermelons growing off of one little plant. And she has this massive plant that has 7 or 8 watermelons. And she's looking at this going, wow, how you prune this and how you care for it will give you a bigger, better harvest. In the same way that this person is talking about sharing with his neighbors, this person was sharing their, special way of pruning their plant. But our minds are the same kind of bed that we plant our seeds in to hope to grow wisdom. But what happens is, because over our lives we've become kind of weak-minded, and what happens is that the news and people around you will plant seeds of doubt, seeds of mistrust, seeds of judgment, and we also plant our own seeds of judgment. And what grows in the garden is weeds and bushes with stickers on them. And you look in your garden and you say to yourself, well, is my garden really giving me the fruit that God wants for me? Or is it giving me something that is bitter and full of thistles and ugliness? And so because I read that, I thought to myself, that's my mind works like that. I thought, isn't that sweet? This person shares his best seeds with his neighbors. And the newspaper guy is like, why would you do that? Because most people are greedy. They don't share what they have that is good. They hoard it to themselves, they hold it to themselves, and they don't really want to share in this way. And I'm only talking about thoughts. If you share your thoughts of good things, higher thinking, then you can help others to grow in that way. But I mean, this guy's sharing his seeds, which are his cherished crop. But he looked even higher, way, way up high, to what happens when you share with each other, when we share with each other, when we truly look around. It actually comes back to us, because then our lives are enriched by the fact that your life is enriched. And if we do this with each other in this way, the way my dad has, that's why we're all here and why you guys are even listening is he shared his life and his seeds of wisdom with all of, and in the mind of the people that were listening, it planted itself and it grew. And some people have been around for years and years and years and have been listening to my father and basically picking up his seeds of wisdom. And then they grow inside of you, and you share that with your children and your friends. And then they grow also. Not always. Not always. I watched my wife with her little garden. You know, sometimes I'm like, why isn't that growing? I don't know. Maybe the soil is not good. Maybe, I didn't water it enough. Maybe one thing or another. Who knows? Too much pH or alkaline or whatever. Who knows why things don't grow in the garden if you're not a scientist? There are people that are, make a science out of growing things. Chuck is over here, Chuck Williams, one of our board of directors. He had all these worms and these worm castings and all this. And I went with my wife one time and we went to this worm place and we bought worm juice. And I thought, in my life, I would never, ever hear the word worm juice. It's so interesting because, there is a little science to everything you do, even in your life. There's a little bit of science to how you live your life. And you could call it science, or you can call it common sense, or you can call it blessing. But the seeds that are planted in our mind, good and bad, which ones grow? The same way between good and evil, when there's the battle between good and evil, which one wins? The one you feed, the one you water. So I was thinking about my wife again, of course. I'm very blessed to have a good wife, and I haven't always appreciated that. I remember thinking early on in my life, as I was a entitled young kid. I think young people always feel like they're entitled to everything the world has to offer. And that's what you see right now with a lot of people in the world. They feel entitled. What's yours is mine, and you owe me. But I have a good wife, and I remember when we would watch a movie, because we've been together. As a matter of fact, our anniversary is August 3rd. We'll be married 35 years and together 40. But we would watch a movie, and when if it was an R-rated movie came on, a bedroom scene or something, my wife would look away, and she'd try and cover my eyes. I'm like, quit it, what are you doing? That's why we're here. We're trying to see something crazy out there. It's like, I never said that to her. But, that you go to a movie and you see something that is nasty. I don't know, whatever it is. Well, see, the two ladies said embarrassing, offensive, and the guys are all like, I know what he's talking about. But there's something that is a little bit sinister inside of us that wants to see that stuff. And the women are like, it's embarrassing, it's offensive. My wife, she said to me this one time, I don't want that in my head. And on the other hand, the man mostly wants to entertain those thoughts in his head. That's what's already there. When you're a young man, that's what's already there. And for the ladies, they're maybe a little more mature, or I don't know why. The two that are commenting in here, both. It's offensive. It's embarrassing. It's not embarrassing to a man. It's kind of because that's his nature. His lower nature is that already. The devil knows that, and so he's sprinkling little seeds into the mind, trying to get the man to be lustful and all the rest, right? So you have the battle of good and evil from the very beginning of time when Adam and Eve were made aware of their nakedness, right? You have that playing itself out until such times as a man overcomes that and goes, you know what? What is this evil thing in me that is hungry all the time? What is this thing? How can I overcome it? You can't overcome it. You just can't. Of yourself, you can do nothing. We know that. A man cannot overcome that thing. It's just kind of like drinking. They go to Alcoholics Anonymous and all that, and because they can't control themselves. But you get to this certain point in your life where you realize that there is this parallel universe. And you can either be a part of the matrix and the parallel universe of the asleep, or you can be a part of the universe of the awake, of the awakened. And once you start to become awakened, you start to see these things, these seeds planted in your mind, thoughts. People plant thoughts in your mind. And usually it's funny because it works best on a couple different levels. Pleasure, first of all. Because if you feed something that you secretly enjoy, then it grows. The other one is anger. Because if you get somebody angry, we've all heard my dad talk about the angry, if you get angry, I own you. We've heard my dad say that, right? Because at that point, you have lost control of your ability to think clearly because now you're thinking angrily, right? So if somebody makes you angry, they put a thought in your mind. They can create doubt. They can make you doubt yourself because you're angry. And they can call you any silly, stupid, you're a stupid idiot. You don't know what you're doing. You don't have any clue what you're doing. And all of a sudden you start to doubt, well, maybe I don't know, because you're angry, so you're not thinking clearly. The idea here is obviously something my dad has been teaching all of us for over half a century is to be still and know. The difference from being still and know is to be angry and not know. And if you live in the be angry and not know, be judgmental and not know, then your mind is that garden bed in my wife's garden that she hasn't tended to that is full of weeds that are growing faster than the ones. She's not watering them, and they're growing faster than the ones that she's trying to water and take care of. How is it the weed can grow faster without water? How is that? You look around, all around the garden. Everything is growing. It's not being watered. The berry bushes are taking over around the edges. How is that? And you yank them out, and 2 weeks later, there they are again. You don't water them at all. They come back anyway. That's how it works. Coming back to her point of, I don't want those thoughts in my head. I used to think, are you crazy? I like those thoughts. Would never say that to her, just being completely honest. The male lion will mate a couple, 3 times a day if he can, or more. That's his job. He's the lion. He's got to populate his world, his job. So he has no guilt over it. That's just what he does. And I have a friend that has an organization called Embrace the Lion. That's his thing. And then I have another guy that I know that has a organization called Lions Not Sheep. And I get where they're going about being courageous and I guess just fearless, right? And manly, yes. And both these guys are manly, bearded, big, strong guys that work out. I get that, but I don't want to embrace the inner lion. I want to embrace the inner Jesus. I don't want to embrace that animal. That animal is selfish. That animal is mindless. That animal is running off of a program that God puts into the animal so the animal doesn't have to think. Man must think as a man thinketh.
Well, I think that's what we're supposed to do, move from an animal nature to a spiritual nature. This is the test ground here.
It absolutely is. The interesting thing is, though, is that for some reason, man is such an arrogant, egotistical, self-righteous creature. In other words, I'm God. That's what man thinks quietly in the background. He doesn't even want to say those words. He doesn't want to think those words. But at the end of the day, what is the ingredients that I just said? Those are all without God. All those kind of living that life that way, self-centered, willful, angry, sexual, lion-like, if you might want to put it that way, for the sake of the guys that, embrace the lion. That's kind of without God. Because what I'm looking at is that I realize that the less I want to make the decision, because I think to myself every now and then, I have to make the decision. I must do it. It's my job. Again, where's God in that equation? Where is God in any of those kinds of equations? He's not present because you haven't added him in. A seed cannot grow in the dark. You can water it all you want. It's not going to grow. It needs the light of God. It needs the sunshine that is actually a vitamin. Isn't that interesting? We think of all the things that we can consume. I get it. There's vitamins in those. But how is it that the sun is a vitamin and that things literally, this whole earth would cease to exist without the sunlight? Food would stop growing. That would be the end of it. It would get cold, but it's invisible. You can feel it. You know that it has a vitamin D, isn't that right, from the sun? It's the same thing with God. And without God, you have darkness. And who lives in the darkness? Well, we know. Who lives in the shadows? We know. So it's funny. I read that little thing and I thought, to share the seeds of wisdom, to share the seeds that are put in our heart in abundance that never run out. It is literally manna from heaven. It doesn't run out unless we hoard it. If we hoard it, then we have to work much, much harder, by the sweat off your brow shall you earn your bread. We know that. But if we hoard it, then we become very lonely because people they starve around us for love. When you hoard your love, the people you have, whether it's your children or whatever, they starve for love. And then they go elsewhere. They go elsewhere to find that love. And sadly, I was watching, who was it? One of the TV shows or the news channels on Fox. I don't know what it was, but they had a prostitute on last night. And she was the typical looking prostitute, big fake hair, big eyebrows and eyelashes and all painted on face and just the normal looking, you would picture this prostitute. And he said to her, do you have anything to say? Would you give advice to anybody about your lifestyle? And she says, well, it's not good. She said it happened when, I about 12 years old. And we were, my wife and I were watching this. We're about 12 years old, a child. She says, and then it really kicked in when I was 14 and got raped. 14 still. And then, of course, she says, I was looking for love and I just couldn't find it in my family, so I looked elsewhere. Boom. There it is. When you hoard your love, when you just don't want to go the extra little bit to love somebody, your own children, you drive them out. You drive them away.
The hoarding is our judgment and resentment, period.
And a lot of times of our own self for our own failings, and we see it in our children.
It's the pleasure that you seek as comfort for something else. And we don't realize that the something else is the reason for that drive for that pleasure. We want to get away from that conflict that we have, that whatever it is, and to forget about that and go into some type of pleasure to forget about that. And
sex is one. So last week, I said that I read in my dad's little pamphlet, of which we're going to reprint because Connie Derrick, one of our board of directors also, has a copy on PDF, and I want to reprint that. It's very small, and it'll be easy to reprint as a really neat little piece for people to have. But he says in there, the ultimate stress is the truth. And so, Roger, what you're saying there is we're trying to get away from something, and it usually is the truth. The truth about us, whether we're angry, whether somebody's, bitching at us, and it's like, oh, shut up. You're saying that in your head. And in order to not have a fight, we seek out some pleasure so we can calm the beast, right? Whether it's, sex or food. And this is why we're such an obese nation, because people want to keep the peace in the home as long as they can until such times as they can't. And then boom, the marriage breaks up and it happens again and they can't. And boom, the marriage breaks up again. And you see people that are married. I have one friend's been married 4 times. And when do you learn your lesson? Or can you learn the lesson before you destroy a family? Because there's a ripple effect. The truth is the ultimate stress. And so we run from the truth. And again, the truth represents the light that will make us grow spiritually. And instead, we fall from the truth. We seek out the dark side, which gives us pleasure, which is the same thing that Adam and Eve kind of went after, is pleasure, because I want to be a god. Isn't that pleasing, right? It's the same kind of a thing at the end of the day. We be disobedient and we seek out pleasure. Anything that makes you feel good. You have people that are speed demons. I was a little bit of a speed demon for a while. Get a chance to drive on a race car at 200 miles an hour. That's pretty exciting, I'll tell you. But also I was conscious of the fact that it's very dangerous. I was very conscious of it. And I remember thinking, why do I seek out things? Why do you have daredevils? You dare the devil? Well, the devil went down to Georgia. You know that song, right? I don't want to dare the devil. So I've looked at my life and I stopped being a daredevil. A long time ago, actually. Then comes this car called a Demon. And I bought it. And I'm telling you what, that car was going to kill me. 840 horsepower. Now, fortunately, me and my Jewish Jesus, we tricked the devil because we made some money on the car. That's a good Jew. You buy a bad donkey and sell it and make a profit. Anyway, but I look at the whole daredevil thing, and I now I watch my kids and I go, can I deny them to dare the devil the way I did? No, you really can't. You can warn them. You can give them seeds of truth and honesty and say, hey, listen. And they're like, well, Dad, you did it. You had a fast car. You do burnouts and wheelies. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Okay, well, you be real careful. Do it out there in the field where if you do anything wrong, you're in a field. You know, it's like, I'll give you an example. I remember this. It just hit me. When I was 10 years old, my dad had a friend of his over at the house, and the man smoked. He smoked, and my dad was going to help him stop smoking. And I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. My dad says, all right, take your cigarette out and go ahead and light it. And here I'm standing there watching this whole thing, and it was in our living room. And he says, now, take your cigarette and go ahead and take a puff. And I remember watching this whole silly exercise because when you're a kid, you're so innocent. You just don't have all of the garbage, Well, I'll continue with the story and we'll come back to this. So the man takes a puff and he blows it out and he says, all right, now let's try something. He says, hold the cigarette in your fingers and now be aware of those two fingers holding the cigarette. He says, just be aware of them for a moment. He says, now look at those two fingers holding that cigarette. He says, now go ahead and take a puff of your cigarette, being aware. And the man takes a puff and blows it out. And he says, now look at those fingers. Be conscious of those fingers in that cigarette. He says, doesn't it look silly? He says, now that you're conscious of it and you're aware of it, he says, it looks silly. He says, every time you take a cigarette out, he says, you be conscious of your fingers holding that cigarette. He says, just be conscious. Basically, he was teaching them to meditate right there, being conscious of that. That meditative state is just a state of consciousness, is it not? So I'm sitting there looking at this going, well, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Because as a kid, it looks dumb anyway to smoke a cigarette, right? It just looks dumb. It didn't look cool. I was young enough that I didn't even know what cool was at that point.
Change the cigarette to a fork or a spoon and you're eating your meal, and be aware of the fingers holding it.
Same thing. Exactly. I've seen that. My dad do that with people before too. So my dad looks at me and he smiles, that, which you've all seen, that smile, when that beautiful smile my dad had, and he says, you want to smoke a cigarette? And I went, no. He says, well, you might as well give it a try and you'll see how silly it is. So for my whole life, this moment in time is one of those cornerstones. So he says, here. And my dad hands me a cigarette. And he says, do you have a lighter? And the guy hands me the lighter. And my dad says, go on, light it. I don't know what to do. So I held it out and I kind of lit it like a firecracker out in front of me, because that's all I knew how to do. I lit it and he says, so go ahead, take a puff. Go on. And the guy says, you have to breathe it into your lungs. He said, well, you might not want to breathe it in. It might make you cough. He said, but go ahead, take a puff. He goes, but hold on. Right before I put it to my lips, he goes, be aware of your fingers holding that cigarette. So I looked at my fingers and I went, wow. Because I knew I was holding something that was not good for me. I knew it. I was conscious of it. And it seemed so completely foreign to me. So he says, all right, now go ahead and take a puff. And so I took a little itty bitty puff and I went, and I blew it out. And he goes, isn't that silly? And I looked at my dad and I go, yeah, why would anybody do that? He says, I don't know. And he goes, all right, we'll put it out. Go on, put it out now. And I put it out. I was like, wow, that's so stupid. Why would anybody do that? So it boils down to this, though. It's just being conscious of it. But it's like I said to my kids, daredevil, you want to do something? I have a picture of my kids. I saw it on social media. You're not going to believe this. They built a bonfire. They love having bonfires, and we're always doing construction. So they built this big bonfire, and the flames are, 20 feet in the air. And so they post a picture of the flames 20 feet in the air, and that's out. And we have a big field, big field, and it's winter time, so the grass is all green, and it's rains every other day. And so they're out there with their motorcycles, and they're doing things, and they're They just like doing bonfires. And then the next day they come back and they're going to do another bonfire. Well, the pile of stuff was mostly gone, so they threw some more on there and they had a bonfire. I don't know, the flames were probably 6 or 8 feet high. And the next picture is them jumping over the fire with the motorcycle. And they had a little Batman cape on. And they post this on social media, like Evel Knievel. And so I see this the next day on social media. And so I went over to my boys, and one of the boys was a kid that was living with us and who lived with us most of his life from 10 till he went to the Army. And I said, so, hey, this is what's going on out in the field. And I show them the picture and they start laughing. And then they tell me the rest of the story, that one guy kind of crashed a little bit and almost, went into the fire. And I said, so, you guys are tempting fate. And I go, we're not going to have any more of that out in the field, are we? And they look, no, we won't do that anymore. But you cannot stop your children from going out into the world and tempting fate, being a daredevil. You can't. What you can do is try the same way, which is my dad giving me the cigarette and saying, go ahead, give it a try. At a younger age, for you younger parents, let them see how silly it is. Be there with them when they're going to try something. Or if they do try something that is silly and you see it, just bring it to their attention saying, that's not very smart. What would happen if this or that happened? And you bring their consciousness up. The devil wants to pull it down. You have to keep pulling it up. It's a lifelong thing. Until the day my father passed away, I always felt like my father was my mentor, and he would bring my life up. Whenever I was with him, his job was to bring my life up towards the light, because he knew the devil was working on me all the time. So always a father to my children. My dad was always a father to me and to many of you folks as well, correct? And I'm forever grateful, because as I'm coming into my season of understanding, I realize the importance of the simple things in life, the sharing of the seeds of wisdom, not saying, oh, I have things I want to do. I don't want to go do that Sunday talk, or I'll get somebody else to do it. I try to be consistent with showing up. And when you show up and the gift is for you. The gift for me is for me. Being able to see your guys' faces, be able to see you out in the world and hear the comments and see the comments on social media. And thank you. A lot of people comment from all over the world. We have listeners in South America and in Europe. And thank you guys for those comments, because they're important. I was left one comment from a man who we believe is gone now. He wrote a letter saying that he was in the hospital waiting for some operation on his heart or something. And he said to me, Alan, just keep going. You're on the right path. And this might have been the last letter that he wrote any living person. We've been trying to get a hold of him now for a few months, but no response, so we feel like maybe he passed away. But you know what? Those seeds of love, he didn't have to write me a letter. He wrote a letter. He didn't have to go out of his way to do that. But those seeds of love that we plant are truly the value that we leave behind. I saw a friend whose mother is 90. No, his grandmother is 90. Happy birthday to my dear grandmother, who has 98 great-grandchildren, 28 grandchildren, and like 9 children of her own. He says from one lady came all those people. Look at the ripple effect of that. And it'll be the same for my dad too. From my mom and dad, for one little family will come all these different types of people that will go out into the world and do whatever they're going to do and affect people in their whatever way. And hopefully some of us, children of my dads and moms, will continue to take the path that our mom and dad did. And that's what I'm trying to do. And my sister now is doing the show on Wednesday on the radio show. And I try to do Monday, Thursday, and Friday. Our attorney, Pat Kelly, who's the country farmer. Here's a guy who goes to work every day in dirty blue jeans and hiking boots, usually with poop on them, because he goes and deals with his sheep before he goes to work every day and after work. And his fun little comment that he likes to make is, the meditation is called the Be Still and No Exercise. He says, I like the Be Still and Mow meditation, because he has to mow his field. But everything that he does is relative in his law practice to how he raises his animals and how he works on his farm. And to me, that is a beautiful thing. He says, if I have a sheep that's dying, and that's how he's going to explain to me on this business deal. I love that. So coming back to the farmer, if we didn't have farmers in our country today, where would we be? And of course, now you see Bill Gates and all those kind of guys buying up farmland. And so that's a little scary. That's another story, though.
Throughout my life, there's been like a constant thing with sweets, like sugar, and the past over a week, I knocked it off because it was affecting me in physical ways. And that's just cleared up. But I noticed that, I don't use women. I don't use them in my mind. I don't go whoring around. But that sexuality is there. But I noticed it was related to the sweets because that has really diminished a lot too. Like with sweets, it's not serving any purpose but the pleasure, basically. And I'm not saying it's wrong all the time, once in a while, but with me, it was a mind thing. Even this morning, I woke up, okay, I'm going to go drive through McDonald's and get a breakfast sandwich, right? And right away, right after my meditation, and it was just there, and I just let it pass. But it's the same thing with sweets. It's like a plant that's I can always go to that milkshake. I always go to that ice cream, and it makes me feel better, but it's not serving a nutritious purpose.
We all know that my father has said probably 1 million plus times that when you get angry, you also get sexual. Mm-hmm. And when you have sweets, which is feeding the wrong side of yourself, it also makes you sexual. It's interesting how each one of these things, it's kind of like physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, or for every sin, there is another sin, which is interesting.
I didn't calculate it for that reason, but it just happened.
Well, it does just happen.
This kind of goes back to your garden metaphors and everything, because I had these worm bins that the worms need food to eat, and I could collect their worm juice at the end of the day. So I had it all set up. But when I would have a plant in my garden that would either not be producing because it wasn't growing right, or the insects got to it, or it had past its prime and it wasn't producing, it was going to seed, I'd just pull it up and give it to the worms because they need the food. And after a while, I began realizing the weeds that I pull up, I can give those to the worms. Sometimes I needed more worm food to keep the worms going because they will replenish my garden for next year. So after a while, I began looking for the thing that needed to be sorted out of my garden, because sometimes it's so hard. You plant it from seed, you don't want to pull it up. Oh my goodness, I can't pull it up. And you try a few things to get it to do better, and it's not doing better. Always had trouble with growing kale in this hot climate, and I figured out a way to do it, got great seeds, and I had the most unbelievable kale crop. And nobody wants that much kale. We can only eat so much, and I have the most beautiful kale plants. There's wall-to-wall kales in this one raised bed, and so I realized the other day, well, I think maybe I'll just pull up some of the kale plants and thin it out a little bit. Nothing's going to seed. It's surviving all this hot weather. You can't believe what it's doing. I said, well, I'll just thin it out a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have worms to give it to right now, but I've reestablished my worms. But the whole point is I'm here working in my little garden in my backyard, and I'm learning lessons about life, because you have to be willing to pull the seed that is now producing, but it's not producing well, or it's infecting, or it's failing, or something's wrong with it. You pull it out of your garden. You don't let it hold that place in the garden. If anything else, you will take it and put it in the compost pile or put it in the worm bin, and it will degenerate, and now you'll be able to put that back on the garden to refurbish it. You don't keep the garden the way it was. It's always changing. Sometimes pests come in, you don't know where they came from, and all of a sudden you have to deal with them. And if you just wonder about it and wonder what to do and go about sorting things out and not be afraid to pull it out by its roots and throw it away.
Even if it's good.
Even if it's good. Good, healthy food, but hey, it's a toughness, but it's not a meanness. It's the funny thing. And you have to learn to do this. And that's why part of the reason we're here, and what Roger was saying, it's not about building this great garden. It's about learning how to be a gardener and having the wisdom and the detachment from your garden to be able to do the hard things a garden needs.
The movie Being There with Peter Sellers, he's a Chauncey Gardner. Everything he talks about is about the garden.
Well, your dad said that sometimes some people are just there to pass the word along to somebody else who needs to hear it.
It's so true. When you're in the garden, you cannot help but apply it to life in every way. You can't talk yourself into something in the garden. It either works or it doesn't. If it's not growing, you got to figure out, soil looks fine, maybe it's not. Maybe you didn't put the right soil in, maybe there's no nutrients in there. So with anything living, if it's not thriving, you can't just, there's a lesson there. You have to, I don't care how many times you garden, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, there's always going to be something for you to learn, whereas in life you can say, well, that really is good, but you can't talk yourself into it in the garden.
I got to tell you one plant story. We had a zucchini plant, and I kept saying to Charles, it's not growing. It's not growing. There's something wrong with that plant. And he went out and dug it up, loaded with ants underneath. And once he got rid of the ant problem, diatomaceous earth, we got zucchini.
One of the greatest tricks in my gardening is transplanting.
Yes.
If it's not doing well here, I just move it over there. And sometimes I've moved a plant 3 times before it all of a sudden took off, and it looks miserable, and it's producing the best fruit I've ever seen. Can't believe it.
I want to bring it back to these principles, and I want to go one up from plants and insects to animals. And this is going to bring it, I think, back into the spiritual conversation even better. Why is it that when we have dogs and cats and birds, and doesn't matter whatever pet we have, when it passes on, we say, oh, it's passing over the rainbow bridge, and we all shed a tear, and the animal's going to animal heaven. Isn't that interesting? And we fondly love that animal, and we have all these beautiful thoughts of it. It was such an innocent, fun, sweet animal. When we know every time it pooped on our carpet, we wanted to kick it across the room. Animals make mistakes. They get sick and they don't know where to throw up. They don't go over to the toilet, lift the lid, and barf into the toilet. No, they're right there. They're just, blah, there it is on the middle of the carpet. Well, why is it when our children or our friends make mistakes or sin, we call it sin. Remember, the origination of the word sin is to miss the mark, right? As the archer shoots his arrow and he misses the mark, that's called a sin. It's kind of a different thing, because if you sin, if you embrace evil, it's a little different than just missing the mark. But in your normal day, when you fail or fall from grace, you miss the mark, you make a mistake, and then you're sorry for it. Well, we judge ourselves, and then we don't let go of it. What do they say about a dog always returns to its vomit? You know that story? And it wants to eat the vomit? Why is that? I'm sure there's a reason for that. But if we're like animals, we keep making that same mistake over and over again, because we're not using our higher nature. We're not using our consciousness. We're living out the programming of an animal over and over again, vomiting and eating it and vomiting and eating it. It's the same kind of, it's disgusting to say that, but it's the same kind of thing. Overeating. I mean, how many times have all of us as adults, like Fabian over there, he says, for a week now, I've been good. What are you, 55? Took you to 55 to stop eating sugar? And then next week, will you fall off the turnip truck? Of course you will. You're going to.
I did have a period in my life where I did do that. Yeah, and then I fell off.
But you're not evil for making these mistakes. You're just 59. Wow, you look good. But the thing is that we're not evil for making mistakes. We're evil when we embrace those mistakes and make excuses for them, the same way that Eve and Adam did.
Well, we get in a pattern. We get in a habit, and
I got this bad habit. It's called sinning. It's called hating. It's just a really bad habit. It's true, but it's an unconsciousness is what it is. It's you're not choosing consciousness. You're allowing for unconsciousness, which is choosing.
But with animals, they don't have that. It's different. It's like they're. I was in an elevator, and there was these people, and they had a parrot in a cage. They said, oh, yeah, we've had this parrot. It was from our parents since 85 years old. And the parrot looked like 1-year-old. It didn't have any...
Animals are not...
have the sin
They're
factor.
not subject to the same thing. Animals are here to serve us.
Wait a minute. If you took all the feathers off, it might have been very wrinkled. You don't know.
Oh, have you ever seen a parrot without feathers? The ugliest thing you've ever seen. And I want to just talk about it. It looks like a dinosaur, but my point is, though, is that Animals cross over the bridge. We love them and forgive them, and it's all, all good memories and thoughts. But when people die, other people want to judge them. Why did that person die? That person died because this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden the judgment comes up, and you can't even imagine all the thoughts and things that people have posted and sent questioning about, why did Roy die? Well, and Catherine, how did he die? Is it like a fixation on it? But it's funny. It's like if you think about the way they talk about Moses. Moses went up to the mountain, and we don't know what happened to him. He probably sat down and he was gone, but who knows? But my father, I can tell you this, that he was ready to go. He felt like he had done everything he could do here, and he did what his job was, which was to come and spread the seed of wisdom that there is a loving God. He's watching, he's listening, he's there, and you must be still to be able to know his message. You must be still quiet and calm to hear and know his message. And it's a really simple, it's like a little handful of corn. It's like you look at it and go, that's it? Yep, that's it. It's that simple. But we all complicate it. So the next thing we do is go, well, what did he die from? How did he die? How long did he suffer? It's like, wow. My dad decided it was over, didn't discuss it with any of us, didn't say, hey guys, I'm going to be going to heaven now. He just decided it was done. And in 4 days, he took his last breath, and that was it. The lady that was there that evening, she said it was the most beautiful passing she'd ever seen. This is a person that sees this all the time. And I think that the same way that we're talking about, sometimes you just got to tear that perfectly healthy plant out of the ground and maybe transplant it. Maybe you're a little more careful than tearing it out. But what's happened is, now that my father is gone, all of us must grow. We all must grow. Because guess what? There's no crutch. There's no Roy Masters to lean on anymore. You can't make an appointment to see him. You can't call him on the radio show. It's on you now. It's on each one of us individually to do what's right and to share the seed.
Roy always said that. He's there to, we already have the seed, like him. It's not so much what he said, it's where he was coming from. And we all have that. We can't latch on to another human.
The funniest thing is when there's something there, you don't know it. And you don't even know sometimes when you've given something up that's valuable that you did it. I value going into places where I don't know the answer and I don't know what to do, and I'm being tested. I get to see my weakness. And there's a part of human nature, especially a man's nature, but it's all human beings, that does not want to see its weakness. It wants to take charge. It wants to be responsible. It wants to do the right thing, what we call the right thing. But what all God wants us to see is that we're helpless, and that's it. We are totally helpless to make ourselves what we need to be. And the way you see that is you don't decide to see that. He shows it to you in a wordless way, and you're willing to bear the showing without even knowing that's what it is he's showing you. And that's the magic of what life is all about.
I don't think dogs and cats go over any rainbow bridge. I think they go into the earth and turn back into the dust that they came from, but I think my dad went over a rainbow bridge. And I think that, obviously there's a heaven and a hell. And I do believe that even the way my dad lived his life right to the very end, he lived it in such a wonderful fashion. And was he perfect? No. Did he make mistakes? Yes. Is he human? Yeah, he wouldn't be human without making mistakes. He's a man that had all the same issues and problems throughout that journey that all other men and women have. And that's what is so beautiful about it, is he made it to the very end. 93 is old.
This is off the subject, Ellen, but I just remember one time you said, and it was just so freeing, you said, you're talking about your relationship with you and Jen, and you just said, my wife's a beautiful woman. You just made it so simple and just so it's natural.
Thank you. She's not only a beautiful woman, she's a good soul.
I didn't mean to sound like Jan's just beautiful. I mean, that's part of what makes her beautiful.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, yeah.
A sweet soul.
Thank you. Well, and it's funny because so many of you folks, I've known a lot of you my whole life. I've known Connie Derek, one of our board of directors, since I was about 10 or 11 years old, so that would be 50 years. I remember somebody knocked at the door one time at our house, and when somebody came to our house in I guess it would have been the late 60s, early 70s, we didn't have a lot of visitors because we didn't have a lot of family. So it would be somebody that was, made an appointment maybe to see my dad or just swinging by, and we would run to the door. And all the kids, there's 5 kids, except my old brother David, not so much, but Mark and Michael and myself and Diane, if she was home, run to the door. Who's there? And outside the door was this lady named Connie Derrick with her 4 kids, and I've known them and stayed in touch with them all these years and watched the struggles of life like we all have. But I'm so pleased to see another beautiful woman that has flourished with all the stress that has been upon Connie Derrick. The same with Diane over here, Diane Williams. I've known her about 30 years. And Chuck, I've known about 30 or so years. And a lot of these folks, I look around the room and it's like, my goodness gracious, Catherine, I've known at least 30 or 35 years.
I guess I have to say something to that wonderful compliment. I did raise my children loving what Roy was trying to teach me, but I was a hard head with my children, and I am just learning really more now what it is to be a true parent and to be in the place where a parent needs to be to really help raise her children in the right way. And now all my kids are older and, off on their own and making all their mistakes, and it is painful for me to see that now. But I'm grateful at the same time to be able to have that knowing and seeing what I did do to my children when I was raising them. And I love seeing the contrast, and I love seeing that I am seeing now. I don't know how else to put that.
You know what? One of the best stories, one of my favorite stories in the Bible is the prodigal son. And the joy that the father had when his son came home from making all those mistakes. And it's such an important story because the brother was jealous and angry. And these stories of the Bible, they're so interesting. And we have a God that doesn't judge us midstream of the test, right? I think I said that last week. The test is a lifetime to that last breath. And just like the guy on the cross that was the thief, he was in heaven with Jesus that day. So our parents may not see us on this earth become the good person they'd hoped we would be, but their seeds are planted in our hearts. And those seeds don't go away. They're planted. They may be buried, but guess what? You look at some of those seeds that it takes some certain stress, and all of a sudden, boink, it pops up through the ground. And whatever that reason is that we take so darn long to wake up. I listened to my father's talks when he was in his late 30s and early 40s, and I went, man, that guy, but if you think of the stresses that he was under, grew up during basically World War II, and the bombs were dropping in London. He's living there, and having to watch his father die when he was a young age, in this 13 or 14. I don't actually know what year it was that his father died. We need to look that up. It's kind of an interesting thing, because I always say 13 or 14 because I think that's what he has said before. But these stresses of life is what made that man. He's one of those men that only come along so often, and they call his generation the greatest generation. Why is that? Because they really suffered. My dad was born in 1928, which we were going through the Great Depression during, and the beginning of the wars and things were happening when he was a little boy. And you think of the stress and the pressure that it would kill a normal human being, and did a lot. But, through the fact that they hated where they came from, I don't think he did. I think he looked at every one of these lessons and learned a lesson from experiencing your parent dying or both parents dying coming to America and knowing a woman only a few weeks and getting married. You know, my dad, and I know I have this. This is an interesting thing because I said to my wife the other day, I go by my gut. If my gut says do this, then by God, I do it. Then I found out I was just hungry. So you got to be careful. That's why a good meditation is important. Honestly, but you learn from those things. You learn from those things. Be still and know. So if you get excited about this decision that you've just made, and I've made a good decision, this is my decision, I had to make this decision. You get excited, you start to get prideful about it, you start to get willful about it. No, I don't care about this, that, and the other. When all of a sudden the reality is you were hungry and you made a bad choice and you need to just admit it. Part of failing is learning. If you don't learn from the failing, then you have to fail again until you learn so that you don't fail. What is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different outcome. Failing is good. Stress and pressure is good if you deal with it right because you grow. So I just thought it was funny this morning when I read that. I thought, what am I going to talk about? I'm the guy that starts the conversation. I have the mic in my hand. What am I going to talk about? And so I thought, well, I'll just wait. It'll come. And sometimes you wait till the very last minute. And I look on social media. I'm just checking to see what's going on. And look at this. Somebody posted a very interesting story. And oddly enough, I have to tell you this. The guy that posted is a guy that I really don't like. But he posted, it's like my dad says, it could come from an old dicky bird. I don't care where wisdom comes from. It can come from an enemy. It can come from somewhere you least expected, which here's this beautiful little story. And then it said, yes, your mind is a fertile field and you don't want the devil to plant his seeds in it because it will grow, especially if you fertilize it and you keep it watered.
I got to tell you a little story. I was sending a package off, and I asked my wife to help me tape up the box. You know, hold the box together while you run the tape around it. And she was doing something in the sink, and her hands were wet, and she dried her hands off. And as she did that, the water got on the address and smeared the address. And I was so irritated, and said, okay, don't worry about it. I'll go get it. But, you know, I said don't worry about it, but I had an attitude about it. And I went over and I looked up the address, and the address that I was sending it to was wrong. Wow. And that's awesome. That's good.
This is exactly perfectly, I said, did you thank her? Perfectly put why it's important not to get angry when things go wrong. Because that thing that went wrong may have made you go a different direction in life. And haven't we often been going somewhere and turned the wrong direction and find out it was the right direction? I mean, my example for that is I went down a road I didn't know. I thought I was going the right way, and I wasn't. And there was some little lady that had went into a ditch. My wife was with me. And I had this big truck, and I had all my chains and all my stuff with me. And because I went the wrong way, it was the right way.
Well, this morning my wife and I were going for a walk, and we got about 5 blocks from our house and realized we hadn't locked something, so we had to walk back. And so we got back and locked it and decided to just take a walk around the block in an area we don't normally walk. So we just went around the block and got halfway on this busy road where they're doing some new building and noticed how terrible the neighborhood looked all of a sudden. Like it's changed to a different reality. And then we went around that block, down that block, and turned the corner, and we're going back towards our house on another part of the subdivision. And this was the cheap part of the subdivision where all these poor quality double wides were, and it had not had great people living there for a while. And we saw one of the houses for sale. So it was a double wide. It wasn't real tacky or anything, but it was for sale. So my wife, when she got home, she checked to see what they're selling it for.
I couldn't believe it.
Tell them.
Well, I said, you guessed the price, because we're pretty good at guessing prices. I said $250, and he said $232. $320,000 for a mobile.
Sale pending.
Sale pending.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Wow. Well, you know what's interesting?
I'm just saying, you discover things you don't expect to discover all the time.
It's funny because on the way here, I said to my wife, we've been here 40 years. And there's always that bad side of town, right? The side of town where the poor folk live, and that's all they can afford a lot of times. But a lot of times people put themselves in those positions through making bad decisions, and then it's just this cascading effect. They don't take care of their things. Their property looks bad. It drives the property value down. And so we're looking at this piece of property in the poor side of town, okay? But we have so much, what was the word I used, Jan? We have so much history with that side of town. But the new person that comes in, without the judgment of it being the bad side of town, the new person that comes into town looks around the town and they go, oh, well, this is the side of town where I can get a good deal. And it looks like others are starting to buy and fix up places here. So the problem is, because we try and glorify ourselves, we want to live on the nice side of town where the nice people live. But the reality is, the good Jew wants to buy the worst house on the best street, or buy a piece of property where the town is growing into that area. And so you get a better deal. Now, of course, you guys know I work with Entrepreneur Magazine, and so these are my principles of doing things. I look, where is our town growing? In any town, where is it growing? Well, it's growing towards the good deals, which are the bad side of town, which won't be the bad side of town if more people start looking at these areas and don't just judge them. So I said to her, we have so much baggage for that side of town that it makes us not want to buy maybe a piece of property on that side of town. But if you can get rid of that baggage and look through clear eyes, like the new person that comes to town looking for opportunity, then you may get a good deal. And so I thought, how do we get rid of that baggage? It really boils down to that higher thinking, letting go of all the baggage, letting go of all the different judgments and things of, oh, that's the bad side of town. Well, one day you're going to look back and go, well, it used to be the bad side of town, but look at it now. Look at downtown LA, what they did down now. Right now, it's the bad side of town again. But downtown LA, down near the Staples Center, used to be slums. It was like, remember the movie The Omega Man with Charlton Heston, when it's like it was all grown over, and that's where all the evil people were living in the old buildings? Well, that's how LA was. Then they started taking those old broken down buildings and they started refurbishing them and putting apartments in there. And it really was flourishing until this idiot got into office named Joe Biden. Never mind, I won't go there. This is church. If you know what I'm saying, though, right? So you take the bad side of town, that's where opportunity is. Isn't that interesting? You take the person that you could consider, oh, that's a bad person. Take the judgment away. Is it? Is it just a lost person? Judgment is what really is, sadly, our navigation system, is how we judge people, how we judge the bad side of town, how we judge our own children, how we judge ourselves. It really makes you go on a bad path in life. Remove the judgment, remove the will, remove all of these things that have been implanted into us, that have been downloaded into us. And that's why I get it, Dad. This meditation exercise is the antidote for all. And I totally get it. I used to kind of just, it's Dad. Dad's doing his thing. Dad's doing his thing, right? Whatever Dad's job is, Dad's doing his thing. But all of a sudden one day, and you're sitting there and going, well, what did Dad really do? Wow, he freed people's souls. And that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what we're all supposed to do, is by bringing them back to that consciousness of holding that cigarette and looking at how silly it is. Or like Chuck said, be conscious of the fork as you put it into your mouth with that 1 more, 2 more, 5 more bites of that stuff you probably shouldn't be eating anyway. Cheesecake, right? Yeah. Something happened here recently. I don't know what it was. We had a bunch of family over and I bought a carrot cake. Notice how I'm going for cheese and carrot. It's all good, healthy food, right? And nobody really ate it. It was too sweet. And so I just kept thinking, well, I'll just eat it slowly over a period of a month or something because I can make things last. Anyway, when the last piece, something said, you need to throw that away. And I looked at it and I had literally a conversation with a piece of carrot cake. I looked at it and I went, you look perfectly good. And I'm holding the plate in front of me, and I thought I could eat that right now. Look at that. It looks so delicious. And it's like, My mouth is watering, you guys, I swear. My mouth is watering. But I looked at it, and then something said, you need to throw that away so that you can kind of overcome this stupid, insane thing. I had to swallow all my saliva there. And so I walked over. I want to be obedient. I walked over, opened up we have a drawer that's got a trash can in a big drawer, and I threw it in there, and I stood over it, and it was like a funeral. I'm looking at it down in there thinking, this is insane. It's perfectly good. Carrot cake. Can you imagine? Look at all this insanity over a piece of carrot cake, right? But what happens is that we have to go through all these things. That's your moment of truth. That was my moment of truth, he says, from last week. So you're absolutely right. But I let go of it. And then, but I want to tell you, when I took out the trash, I took it out very carefully. Because it was a burial. It was a burial.
Take out the trash carefully.
That's right.
Do you think that cheesecake gonna go over the Rainbow Bridge?
I tell you, we are crazy people. But, if you can't laugh at it, right? You got to laugh at yourself.
Back to something serious for a minute, or just Connie, your comment about raising the kids was exactly what I was thinking about when I was doing the garden. Is that if the plant's not growing right, there's something amiss, and we have to figure it out. But we just say, well, it just is what it is, or that's that person's nature, or you see what I'm saying? But it does take a lifetime to figure out a lot of these with human beings and children. I mean,
Well, especially with harder heads.
yeah. And we can have a hard head. We can have a hard head and make excuses why our kids are doing this, blame the kids, take the kids to the psychologist, see what I'm saying? And never look at what we or our husband might be doing. I think that was the main point. Is I was talking to a girl at the growers market, and she asked me about the gardening, and I was saying how, this year it just didn't start out as great. And I said, but you know what? Sadly, it's kind of like children. You learn on the first one, and then the second one, you keep learning at their expense. But that's life. We all do. We all do. My other point was about the whole thing you were talking about, the animal nature and the lion. And, there's different factors to what you're saying, because they say Jesus is the lamb and the lion, the strong, and he was also the sacrifice. But what came to me was talking about all the animal nature stuff. Something that hit me a while ago was, and that's why I was on my phone for a minute, I was looking up a Bible verse, and I'll just read it real quick. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt so that you would no longer be slaves to the Egyptians. I broke the bars of your yoke and enabled you to walk upright, okay? And all throughout the Bible, they talk about walking uprightly in your heart and all this stuff. And it hit me what that meant, because you kind of see somebody walking with their head held high a little bit. But I realized when Adam and Eve fell, they fell to being like animals. Animals walk on all fours. When you awaken, you walk uprightly again the way God created man to be. Created him to walk upright, not with his nose in the dirt, in the dirt of life, I guess you could say. So through the saving grace, you walk uprightly again in your heart, in your mind.
I look at our oldest son, that was my wife Jan, and I think to myself, yeah, we did. We made mistakes on our oldest son, and because of that, he is a different person than the next daughter. And each one, you learn and you don't make those mistakes again, or you don't learn and you do make those mistakes again. But each child is different because we are all going through the learning process. Now, what I also recognize is that does mold their character and make them the kind of people they are. And then back to the ultimate stress is the truth, because we don't like to admit that we made mistakes with our children. And then because guess what? If we made mistakes with our children, we need to learn how to see those mistakes, where they came from, why we made them. You start to look at it and go, okay, well, because I was a selfish bastard, that's why. I mean, in my case, that was it. I was just a selfish, young, 29-year-old kid, punk. And I thought I was a man of the world. But the truth is, as you go through your life, you grow up and then you get a chance to deal with yourself in that child. You're dealing with yourself, the self that you never dealt with at the time, in that child or that adult child now, and you get to deal with it all over again. And you can either have a conversation with that person, because at a certain point they become their own, they start their own family and they have their own life and they have their own way of thinking. And so I'll give you an example. I have a son who's 21. His name's Christian, and he is in Idaho right now doing construction work. And we don't talk to him that much. And I thought the other night, isn't that interesting? He's out in the world. He doesn't hardly call. He's being his own man, which I respect. And he's out there doing his thing. So I got the hankering to call him. I was driving to work. I called him up. He says, "Yeah, what's up, Dad?" I said, "While you're away, son, there's going to be a lot of temptation." Talking about planting the seeds. I said, "There's going to be a lot of temptation that's going to come on you." I said, "That's the way it is in the world. There's a lot of temptation." I said, "You have to be conscious of that temptation and not fall prey to it. It is prowling, looking for you. But if you're conscious of it and you're aware when it tries its little tricky thing, whatever it may be, you'll see it and go, 'I see you.' Just like if there's something in the woods and you finally see it and you go, 'I see you, be gone with you.' Just the consciousness of it, just the awareness of it, shoos it away." So I had this conversation with him. He says, I know. I said, "And you know what? Even when you have an opportunity to be dishonest, don't fall prey. Be honest to a T. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule." I said, "And your life will be full of joy and happiness." Or if you look around you in the world, that's the other side. Those are the people that fell prey to temptation, that weren't honest when they should be, that cheated people when they didn't need to. I said, you can be that different man. I said, that's what it takes, just being conscious of it. Back to the cigarette, the same way when you're holding a cigarette or your fork, overfeeding yourself. If you're conscious of it, you can't do it. You can't do it. I think that we're way too hard on ourselves a lot of time. We judge the living hell out of ourselves and feel like that we're not worthy. But the reality is, that's also part of the test. You got to just have enough love and understanding of the way the world is designed by your Creator. This is just all a big test. And when you make a mistake, you got to admit it. If you go back to the original sin, when you make a mistake, Adam, just admit it. Now, he probably didn't have those instructions had God said to him, "Listen, you may make a mistake, Adam. Eve may tempt you or lie to you, but don't make an excuse for it." See, this is what my dad taught me when I was a kid. Don't make an excuse for it. I did anyway, of course. But I always knew because the seed was in there. And now that I'm embracing that honesty, because you got to love the Lord with all your mind, your heart, and your soul, I'm embracing it. I don't want to make an excuse. The last thing I want to do is be Adam all over again, because each one of us men are Adam all over again, and each one of you women are Eve all over again. And once you embrace it, it's just like that little boy smoking the cigarette. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to make an excuse. I want to lean into the truth. I want to lean into the sunlight. I want to feel it on my face, and I want to be an honest man.
You have to stop judging yourself for that mistake. Judging yourself for the mistake doesn't make you any better.
So you don't really have to do anything. You just have to let go. Because even trying to not judge yourself is a pressure, right? You're putting pressure on yourself again. So what I'm learning is I don't have to do anything except say, "God, I see it." And then just acknowledge it. And then let it go. It doesn't take any, it's effortless. The entire thing. Haven't you guys all heard my dad say, people could change like that, snap of the finger. It's effortless. Well, they can. Most of the time we don't. But once you finally get to that point, it is effortless because I don't have to do anything. God already forgives me, but I have to make sure that I am worthy of that forgiveness by being sorry. being sorry and being willing to move on and continue my life and try and have my life be the ripple effect for my children, my family, my wife, and out on into the world from there. And you have opportunities to be dishonest with yourself, with your family, every single day. The question is, which do you choose? Thanks for coming today, you guys. Also, I just want to make an announcement for those that are out in the world listening around this world that we will be doing a seminar October 21 through 24, and that is the tentative hold date. And if you want to come, we'll start having some advertisements for it in the weekly newsletter, which you can get by calling the foundation. And we'll be talking about it on the radio show and right here. And it's funny because the doubting Thomas inside of me says, you can't do that. But I've been to so many seminars, I can't even tell you. And I know that there's a theme to seminars that the one thing I love about a good seminar is just the innocence of people sharing the way we've been doing here today. This is just a little seminar. But when you bring your problems or you bring yourself with an open mind, like my father always says, if you listen with an open mind, then just maybe, you can learn and have that tipping point in your life and start a fresh new journey, because we really have to keep on seeking the truth. And so you never know where you're going to hear it or who it's going to come from. It might be somebody else at the seminar. And I always felt like the best thing about the seminars that my father did were what people would say and the lessons that they would learn, and the person sitting next to that person would learn from the person that was learning the lesson. So guess what? That's that ripple effect. So October 21 through 24 at Tall Timber Ranch in Oregon here, and we'll be sending some more information out soon. Thank you very much for supporting the foundation and listening to our Sunday conversation. See you next time.